and I was alone on a deserted road, driving to another city for work. The only thing that pierced the darkness was the light from my car's headlights, illuminating the path ahead. But suddenly, with a screeching sound, the car shuddered and then came to a stop by the side of the road. The engine went silent, and no matter how much I tried, it wouldn't start again. With a quick glance around, I noticed an abandoned house that cast strange shadows under the moonlight. My heart began to pound. I had no choice. Either I had to stay in the car until morning or seek help. Cautiously, I stepped out of the car and made my way towards the house. Each step I took, the crunching sound of dry leaves under my feet echoed in the night silence. Approaching the house, the air turned even colder, making it harder to breathe. With each step closer to the abandoned house, I felt as if an invisible force was drawing me in. At last, I reached the entrance door, which was open, swinging back and forth with a screeching sound at every gust of wind. With hands trembling from the cold, I pushed the door and entered. Inside the house, the air was even colder than outside. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the empty rooms. Suddenly, in the corner of my eye, something moved. A tall, slender shadow with a white mask covering its face. The masked man, silent as a ghost floating in the air, moved towards me. My heart was pounding violently, and each beat felt heavy in my chest. The masked man disappeared, and I was left alone in absolute darkness. The sound of my own breathing was the only sound I could hear. But no, there was another sound. A soft whisper coming from the walls, from beneath the floor, from everywhere. Words I couldn't understand, but I felt each word was spoken with a dark intent. At that moment, I decided that I had to escape this house at any cost. But before I could take a single step, a deep, gruff voice came from behind me. "This house is a place for the lost," the masked man said, his voice seeming to come out of the walls. "The family that once lived here, they all died because of a curse that was cast upon them. And now, anyone who steps foot in this house must sacrifice their life." In his hand, an axe glinted as if reflecting the moonlight. "But you," he continued, "you have a choice. Either sacrifice your life and stay here, or..." His voice suddenly cut off, and I was left waiting in the pitch darkness, anticipating the rest of his words. But no other sound came. The only thing I could hear was the pounding of my own heart in my ears. And at that moment, I realized I was not alone. Not just the masked man, but other shadows were also present around me. They stood silent and motionless, like statues made of darkness, scattered throughout the room. Suddenly, one of them, a feminine figure, moved towards me. Her hands swirled in the air gently, and her eyes, devoid of any light, stared directly at me. "You cannot escape," a whisper-like voice came from her pale lips. "This house has chosen you. You will become part of our history." At that moment, all the shadows slowly started moving towards me, and I felt the air being sucked out of my lungs. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The masked man with the axe in his hand came closer and said, "You don't have time to decide. You must sacrifice your life, or..." And at that moment, another voice, powerful and resonant, came from above. "Enough!" The voice that seemed to come from all around commanded. The shadows halted, and the masked man stepped back. "This one is our guest. Allow him to find his own path." And with that, the shadows receded into the darkness, and I was alone once more. I took a deep breath and looked around. The darkness that had been filled with terrifying shadows was now empty and silent. But I knew I couldn't stay there. With whatever energy I had left, I ran towards towards the exit door and burst outside. The cold night wind hit my face as I quickly made my way back to my car. With hands still trembling, I turned the key in the ignition and the car started. The engine sound seemed to come from a distance as I drove away without looking back. Even now, sometimes when night falls and silence envelops me, I hear the whispers of that abandoned house in my ear, and I know that I can never forget what happened. But my story is one without an end.